is Rewired. I'm Jeff Cook.
I'm Katie Whitlock.
Okay, we're continuing our deep dive into Processing Center, talking about 8 3s and 1s who process with doing, and wrapping this sucker up with 3s and 1s. This will be a short episode, I'm sure. No chance that we have anything to over communicate on this one. I'll tell you.
You know what is so funny? I just now, when you realized that, was like, oh yeah, you're a 1. I was like, oh yeah, 3, that's my number. And then I also totally forgot that the other one was your number.
I saw this 3. He was on stage and they had a huge screen of his notes. And next to his notes, a huge screen of him. It was like in this basketball arena. Yeah. And he actually said, "Where are my notes?" Because he was so fixated on the picture of himself on the screen.
Oh,
and it was like,
my goodness.
It was the largest of the screens was his notes.
Listen, I love looking at myself in a Zoom call, okay?
All right, so 1s. Thing about Processing Center, in my language, I want to talk about assessment. I want to talk about how each of these types assess, and we're assessing through what we accomplish. That comes out in Shui's language. She has a lot of great things to say about 1s in the means in which they are trying to accomplish what they're seeking to accomplish, and that's something that we talked about last time, but I would love to get into the specifics here. So anything to say about those 8 3s and 1s before we jump into this?
I guess I'll just say what I said again in the 8 episode, just in case anybody didn't catch that. Whereas I think of processing centers as like at the end of the day, what needs to happen for you to feel okay. And I keep wanting to come up with a better word than just feeling okay, but I haven't yet. But at the end of the day, right? You might care about a lot of things. You might care about getting things done and your relationship with people and how you do it and all the things. But at the end of the day, if you had to pick just one thing, what would you pick? And if at the end of the day, that one thing was missing, it would throw you off. So for me as a doing processor, I also care about my relationships with people, right? Like, it's not like I don't touch the feeling center or anything like that. But at the end of the day, again, if I don't feel like I have moved forward in my day or in my week or my month or whatever, it feels like it was a waste. Even if I have great relationships with people over the course of that month, right? Even if I came up with a lot of plans and really thought about things and planned them all the way through. If I don't look back and see that I have moved forward, I feel like I've done nothing. So and you could apply that to the feeling processing and the thinking processing, I think. That's how I think about processing centers. The last thing. That's exactly right. Yeah.
Yeah.
What'd you say?
We'll build that. I think we'll build on that. Yeah. When we get to the other 2 centers, notice how that same thing occurs. Mm-hmm. If this one thing is locked down and in order, I'm fine.
Yeah. Yeah. You might also care about other things, right? But they're not like the end all be all thing.
Yep.
Yeah.
This is why, in my relationship with Kelly, she frames rest as itself a checkmarkable accomplishment. In order to get her mind around, I have done something that really matters for my soul, and that was taking a day to lay in my bed and do nothing.
Yeah.
Validation. And I feel the same way. Like I need to say, okay, my rest, my form of rest is very aggressive. Like I'm getting out of town and I'm doing physical activities and I'm like, that was replenishing. Check. Same story.
Yeah.
What's hilarious is that other people, do you experience this? Like other people can judge those who process with doing based on this. Is that like many of my friends will want to say, you need to slow down. You don't have to be working all the time.
Yeah.
You don't. And it's like, this is where I feel happy, comfortable, and whole.
Mm-hmm.
You know?
Yeah. People are like, slow down. It's okay. I'm like, no, I'm having a great time. I'm very comfortable here.
This is a helpful angle, I think, on all of these, and we talked about it in an upcoming episode on early access. Did an interview with you and Sarah, your mom, and her desire for you to have certain kinds of relationships with certain kind of depth came out.
Mm-hmm.
And that's a great example of kind of not the opposite, but one of the other centers. Somebody who processes relationally is going to primarily look at the people they love and care about and their relationships. Are your relationships going well?
Right.
And that's going to be what's primary.
Yeah.
Same kind of story. Anyway.
Same kind of story. One more thing I'll say about that is, one thing I've heard is, we'll say reactive types often think of themselves as big doers, right? So I'm really talking about 2s and 6s because, one, you are a doer, you're a doing processor. 2s and 6s sometimes are surprised to find out that they are not a doing processor because they think of themselves so high in doing. And then the question I have heard asked is, well, how often do you get overwhelmed by everything you have to do, right? And very often they're like, oh, I get overwhelmed all the time. Right. And that's the difference. 8s, 3s, and 1s, I really don't think we often get. I don't know how you would respond to that because you're the only one in the reactive triad with them. But I very rarely get overwhelmed by what I have to do. Sometimes I get overwhelmed by what's like expected of me emotionally. But I never get overwhelmed by like my checklist that I have to do. Very, very rarely. What are your thoughts on that?
My checklist is invigorating.
Yeah.
I need to have things in my future that I'm excited about.
Mm-hmm.
When I have checkmarked all the things, I naturally move into 7 space and I start dreaming. So when I have, quote unquote, when I've done the things, when I'm processing with doing, I look around and I say, look, I got my grad degree. I've published 3 books. I started this business. I did this. What's next? That's how I function. And I have a long list of successes that I don't really think about very often, but I do think about what's next. I do think about, like, I need to continue to build these certain things that allow me to feel like I'm improving myself, improving the world, improving the relationships of the people around me. When I get overwhelmed is when everything kind of bottlenecks and I've got 12 things on my to-do list that are large in scope, even small in scope. Yeah. I have to send a book to one of our readers, and that means I need to drive across town to mail it. That can be just like one of the things. So I will short circuit at those levels, but that's the only overwhelm I feel. What do you feel? Do you feel you probably hit overwhelm in a crash-like state if you ever do? Yeah.
Like I said, I get very not. Did you see that 3 just come out? Not very overwhelmed, but
let's paint the picture here.
Let's paint the yeah, right. I do get overwhelmed when I think about. So I am an introvert. I do not get a lot of energy from being around people. I also think I'm a self-pres 3. I don't really know. So the moral of the story, I don't get a lot of energy from being around people, and so I do get overwhelmed when I think about, like, if I have to teach a class tonight, let's say, right? I never get overwhelmed by the list of things I have to do before I teach the class, putting everything together, getting everything in order. I do get overwhelmed by thinking about how much I'm going to have to connect with people that night and how much I'm going to have to slow down to be a good teacher and to really look people in the eyes and hear where they are and meet them where they are. Like, that is what's overwhelming for me. That makes me very tired thinking about having to do those sorts of things. If I could just go in and be like, boom, 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 Enneagram knowledge for all of you, and everybody would be like, yay, thank you. That would be great.
Right.
Right?
Yeah.
But the emotional part of teaching, that is what overwhelms me. Or anything, the emotional part of anything.
I assume some of that is deeply satisfying, though, as well.
It's super satisfying. Yeah, like
pings, yeah.
That's why I want to do it, because I know it's satisfying when people trust me and start. I always joke, it's always like week 5 or 6 in a class where like the first person cries telling a story. And like, of course, I never want people to cry, but there is a small part of me that's like, yes, like we got there. Yeah. You know what I mean? Like, yay.
We got there is the thing, yeah.
And so I love it, but I have to do a lot of emotional work to like build that space for people. What feels like emotional work to me, right? So it's worth it for sure. But my natural hardwiring is just to like do the thing and then be like surprised that people didn't feel okay enough to like share their deepest secrets with everybody in the room, you know?
Right.
So
I'm going to start us off with a quote that I'm jumping ahead in the chapter, but it relates to this quite a bit. So we're talking through Joey Shuey's When Working Together Doesn't Work. We're only highlighting a couple of quotes from each of the chapters that focus on processing center. Lots of great stuff in the book. You should buy the book. It's a top 10 book to be reading in Enneagram right now. Lots of things to talk about here. But she writes on page 62 at the top, ones, when speaking of ones, we're going to talk about ones here for a second. Ones filter and process with the center that is the most difficult to counterfeit. Love this as a first line.
Yeah.
She says, human beings can convincingly feign concern for others, feeling, or rational thought, thinking. It's arguably more difficult to feign measurable productivity. The reality of one's inability to stand independent from the way tasks are accomplished contributes to their desire to control the process. I think that is spot on.
I underline that too. That was so good.
I'm so susceptible to people faking feelings and faking thinking. And she's exactly right. You just can't fake doing. You built the building and it stood or it didn't.
Yeah.
And you just can't fake that. And 100% of my energy goes to what can I build? What are the true metrics that are honestly stated such that we can say, all right, where are we in the world? And that has both positives and negatives. What are your thoughts there?
I liked this quote because of the last part of it, where she says the reality of one's inability to stand independent from the way tasks are accomplished contributes to their desire to control the process. Because I think it aligns so well with the interaction between your stance and your processing center. A lot of times when I talk about reactive stance, 1, 2, and 6, it's really hard for me to understand how that can be not focused on people. Like, because to me, the external world is people, right? And so sometimes it's hard for me to wrap my brain around what ones are seeing when they're looking outside of themselves, but they're not focused on people. Like, what are you doing?
Yeah.
And I thought this was such a good explanation of it. It's like, it's the way tasks are accomplished and how are we doing this thing, right? It's not just me doing it all by myself. Like, we want to be making the world better, and how do we do that and all the things, but it's still all task oriented. It's all task oriented, right?
Of all things to build on that, sometimes it's actually a huge temptation for ones to say, I'll just do it myself. Like I would prefer, idealistically, I would prefer to pull people into action and do things together. And that's very gratifying, but it's super unfortunate that like my nuanced way of judging outcomes pushes me into spaces where I'm just like, it would take me way longer to explain to the people that I'm working with what I want than to simply execute what I want. And is a very bad, that leads to burnout.
Yeah.
So it really ambitions. You're exactly right though. Like, I'm not necessarily looking at relationships first.
Yeah.
When processing doing, and 8s likely aren't either, but you are.
Yeah. I think the last thing I was going to say about that was that I think this is a really good example of something that happens in the Enneagram everywhere with anything you're learning about the Enneagram, is the stuff that is so deep in us is a blind spot for us because we don't even know it's happening. And then the stuff, the layer above that, is what we actually recognize in ourselves. So that's what makes people mistype, right? Like 6s so easily recognize their anger. It's really hard for them to recognize their fear, right? Because it's so deep. And so they way over connect to anger. They're like, oh yeah, I'm angry or I'm mad or whatever. And what I heard there was ones, I do hear from ones a lot. No, I do things by myself a lot. Fine, I'll just do it by myself. But I think like you just said, there is this deeper want to do it together. So it might actually be easier for you to recognize when you do it by yourself. Whereas a 3 or an 8, it was never an option to do it with somebody else. So I don't like think of myself as someone who does everything independently. Yeah. Because there's like, what else would I have done? You know what I mean? Whereas a 1, I do see ones point out, no, I do these things by myself, or I want to do it by myself because of these things. But that makes me wonder if, because that's the thing they recognize versus the thing that's super deep. I don't know if that super makes sense, but I see that all over the Enneagram, and that just reminded me of that.
The ways that 3s and 8s, so to jump into affect groups, and we're going to do a lot more work on this, but this in my book as well. The ones are going to be pulling people into action. And there's just so much of our connection has to do with, can I pull people into doing the thing that I'm doing and accomplishing the thing that I'm accomplishing? That just becomes super valuable. The 3 and the 8, both, it seems to me, from that independent space, can look at the world and say, what am I wanting to give? In my experience, the 3s are looking at the relationships that they really long to be a part of and saying, how can I make us all look better? What can I contribute to us moving things in a more successful, praiseworthy fashion? And so there's not necessarily, I don't think the 3 has to sell anyone on anything. I have to sell people on stuff. The 8 likewise can stand back until it's like, all right, you need my strength, you need my power, you need the things I have to give. And they just kind of wait.
Yeah.
And then they execute. And that's where connection takes place. 1s, 4s, and 7s, loneliest numbers because they're always trying to pull people into their thing, and sometimes they have to go by themselves.
Yeah.
So,
and like if you are motivated to pull people in, you are going to notice when they don't, which again might make a 1 notice when they have to do things by themselves, right? Whereas a 3 and 8 don't notice when we're doing something by ourselves, because that's just what it's like always, right? So
that's exactly right. That's true. Okay.
Anyway.
First quote I had is on page 60. She says, while 8s share a triad and processing center with 1s, their penchant for action and standards for doing are not impeded by others. This builds on what you were saying. In other words, 8s are not distracted by others as they focus on the task. 1s are acutely aware of others, yet that cognizance will never supersede a motivation to do what is right in a way that is right. She's going to talk a lot about an idea she calls support center, and she notes that the support center for 1s is their feeling center, is their emotions. And so their doing is supported by feelings, where for 8s, their doing is supported by thinking. So as 1s, let's just focus on 1s for a second. As 1s are doing things, how that affects other human beings really matters. The target, kind of, as we were just saying, the target is still the target. So that's primary. But how the target affects others will be highly influential, at least how I come to the world. I assume that's true of other ones. What do you see there?
I underline this too, and I think it's a great example of what I was saying at the beginning, that whole end of the day thing. What are you going to do? Of course, relationships are important to 1s, right? Again, you read that as a support center. I read that as a stance thing. 1s are acutely aware of others. I read that as like a reactive stance thing. But I do think it's connected to you're supported by feeling as well. But the cognizance of others will never supersede a motivation to do what is right in a way that is right. At the end of the day, you are going to do what's right. And I have seen, like, 1s will sacrifice a relationship. They don't want to, of course, right? They will sacrifice a relationship if they need to in order to get something done. She continues that paragraph. She compares it to 2s, which is feeling supported by doing. It's kind of the opposite of a 1 in that way. And she's like, 2s won't do that, right? 2s always want to save the relationship over getting something done. And I think I'm shooting from the hip here. I think this is hard. Sometimes this is hard for people to pick which processing center they're in, because I don't think we actually encounter many situations in our life where you really have to pick one, right? Where if it really comes down to it, what are you going to do? Like, a lot of times a 1 can do what's right and save the relationship, right? If I do it in the right way, I say the right words, this person still likes me, the relationship is saved, and I got to do what I need to do. So we don't often, I think, see ourselves like having to choose between one or the other. It's just something I was thinking about when I read that part of the thing as well. But so I guess I would say, like, if you're listening to this and you're wondering what processing center you're in if you don't know your number. Like, you're going to have to be aware of these rare moments where life does make you choose between thinking, feeling, and doing. And, you know, which one are you inclined to pick? Because I do think we get multiple of them a lot of the time. That was not super related to processing center, but.
No, I think this is spot on. It's interesting to me, again, when talking about reactivity, your mind goes immediately to, well, of course you're reacting to other people.
Yeah.
I am reacting to other people in part. I'm also reacting to the physical world,
the
and I'm reacting to the data and what I think about things. So that reactivity can be of that sort as well. But I imagine this might be true of a lot of types, as you were saying. When we're processing with our dominant processing center and our secondary center gets in the way, what happens? I bet we could bring up situations where it's just like that creates a real tension for the person. So she outlines this almost throughout the chapter in terms of this is maybe easiest to see with ones. They want to accomplish the thing, and yet how they treat other people along the way will always be real difficult. Mm-hmm. So ones in excess might just push all in on what they're seeking to accomplish. This is the right thing. This is what we're going to do. If you get hit by the bus on the way, sorry about that. This was the right thing to do.
Yeah.
That might be the excessive side. Ones who are healthier may really try to even that out, as you were saying. Let's care for people and do the right thing. That can be really tricky sometimes.
What does that feel like as a one when you are in that moment of like, I can't save these relationships with these people. I'm just going to do what I know I need to do. And if you get hit by the bus, whatever. Like, does that cause you a great amount of stress?
It does, because treating other people well is also the right thing to do, as it were.
Right.
So it's not like I'm running people over all the time.
No.
But it's also compounded by the fact that I'm present. So I can't wait a week on this. We're doing this now. So in conversations, ones can come across a little bit more candid and blunt and apparently unfeeling, because they're dealing with the problem in real time on some of these fronts. But when, just depending, this is where like really thinking through the target ahead of time really needs to be done for the one, and understanding what the costs are going to be along the way really needs to be thought through by the one, because once you're moving towards that target, it's really difficult to not say this was where we were going.
Yeah.
So you'll see a lot of foundational thinking. I talk about this all the time, foundational thinking from myself, at least, in terms of I need to think through everything before we execute, because once we start executing, I will be pretty committed.
Right.
And that's where that hard head, black and white kind of one side kind of comes out for me.
Okay, you've told me that 50 times, and that, sometimes you hear something for the 50th time and you're like, oh, that's interesting. That makes sense to me.
In contrast to threes, who can pivot fast on these fronts. And because the goal was never, we need to build this building. The goal was always, I want people to see me in a certain light. And so pivoting, because that can be the goal through which you're assessing you're doing, I'm so envious of this, because I can't move in that way.
Well,
you know what I mean there?
I do. I only know that because I read this book. It was shocking to me reading through the 8 and 1 chapters and then reading through the 3, because she points that out, that 8 and 1s are planning before they do. Like, they have the steps and they know what they're going to do. And, maybe again, stance, maybe 8s are a little better at pivoting, but like 8s have a plan and they know the steps they want to do, all the things. I don't.
Yep.
I think theories think that we do, but when I was reading through the 8 and 1 chapter, I was like, I do not do this. Like, the amount of energy it would take to actually plan out the steps. I feel like this feels so stupid, because I don't know how to explain it without making it sound silly. But I feel like I just have an idea and then I start running towards it. And I feel like I just grab the nearest thing that I feel like gets me closer to that goal.
Mm-hmm.
You know what I mean? And then I'm grabbing the next thing, and then I'm grabbing the next thing, and then I'm grabbing the next thing. And maybe other people maybe that's what we're talking about when we're talking about threes, pivoting. But like, can you really pivot if you never had a plan in the first place?
Yes. It's what are you assessing in your doing? Because what you are seeking to accomplish has something to do with the perception of others of your success.
Am I viewed? Yeah.
There is an image that comes to mind immediately for me with threes on this front is like the professional athlete who's part of a very successful team, but he finds himself in the championship and he finds that his team is losing badly. I have seen threes who will check out mid-game.
Oh, yeah.
We aren't winning.
Yeah. Screw this.
So what does it look like for me to look successful in that space? Mm-hmm. It may look like, look, I really wasn't trying, or I got injured. I pulled up injured. It wasn't my fault that we lost. Yeah. The goal for everybody else or for a lot of other folks might be, look, we need to really double down and try and push through this. We can come back. Whereas the three's like, dude, hamstring pull. Sorry about that.
Well, yeah, and
because it's about the perception.
It is like 8s and 1s. Like the goal is winning the game. And I would have thought forever that my goal was also winning the game, but it's not. My goal is winning the game because if I win the game, then I'm a winner. Mm-hmm. And if I get to the point where I realize we're not going to win the game, then okay, I never really cared about winning the game in the first place. I just cared about looking like a winner. So now what can I do in this situation to make me look like a winner? Right? So I can't win the game. Okay, great. Whatever. Right? And that was really, again, it makes me feel so stupid to say. That was really shocking for me reading all these doing processing chapters to realize that my other two partners in the doing center are really concerned with the doing. The doing for me is only in service of a bigger goal, right?
Yes.
I started somewhere else. I'm just using
nothing wrong with that.
The doing to get this other thing, right?
That's what it is.
So that, again, that kind of places doing center in like the hierarchy of the Enneagram, right? Like your center of intelligence is always going to be kind of where you come home. Your processing center is like, what tools are you using to get that thing, right? So.
Yeah, alongside stance.
Agreed. Yeah, I was going to say center of intelligence and stance are like your two big things, but.
Yeah. To bring in affect for a second, again, the way that you're connecting with other people is creating those environments. Are we going to be successful when that doesn't happen? 3s, 6s, and 9s are part of the attachment group, and they will detach from relationships when their motive isn't being fulfilled. 9s when things get chaotic. 6s when things get, too chaotic as well, get unsafe. Mm-hmm. But 3s when you all look like you're failing, I'm out.
Yeah, I don't want to be here. Yeah, why would I want to be here? Yeah.
And I find that really interesting. Whereas the one idealist that we are, it's like it's pushed till the end, and you drive the tires off of the car and look around and say, well, I guess that didn't work.
Well, and I feel like, I'm wondering if maybe we can do this with all the processing centers. But what I feel like as the one in the middle, who's not actually using these tools to service, quote unquote, what they're meant for. Yeah. I feel like when I look at 8 and 1s, I feel like what you give me is like integrity, right? We have to finish the game and we need to win no matter what people think, right? You started the game, you need to finish it. And that's what I feel like 8 and 1s offer me. Like, how do I use these tools for kind of what they were originally intended for? So I don't have an answer for feeling and thinking yet, but I'm interested if maybe we'll come up with something for the other processing centers too. But that's what I feel like. Looking at 8 and 1s, I feel like they teach me integrity and how to use these things for really building and not just like image crafting.
One of the things I love about 3s in this space is normally when 3s are young or immature, it is the chasing after the marks
Yeah.
of success that are just obvious, likes, trophies, etc. Threes, when they get mature, begin to recognize deeper, more lasting, praiseworthy elements to a human being, as you're kind of saying. It's still the case that it's the radar for excellence, just as it actually hits things that are excellent.
Yeah.
And they take that back into that same space, though, given I'm embracing these new marks of excellence and self-appraising in that space. Is that fair to say?
I think so.
Okay.
Do you want me to give an example?
Yeah, dude.
Sorry. Everyone listening, I know we're supposed to be talking about ones right now. Sorry.
It's going to be the 1-3 episode.
It's a
I
1-3
think
episode. I work for a chef who I'm almost certain is a 3. I just haven't actually asked him, right? But I'm nearly certain he's a 3. And you will hear him say, and he doesn't know anything about the Enneagram, right? So he's not saying this in an Enneagram way, but I have heard him say so many times. He opened his restaurant in 2000, I think, or 2001. And he has a very successful restaurant. He's a very successful business, a big company. You'll hear him say at the beginning of his career, he was really worried about, winning Best of Cincinnati or winning all these awards that let him know that his restaurant was doing well, right? And now, I've heard him give the speech a million times. Like, he'll tell you, I really don't care about those things anymore, right? Because I think he's a 3. I think there is some part of him that will always care about those things. But he'll say, like, I already got those things. You know what I mean? Yes. I don't need those things anymore. I don't need more awards on the wall. I really don't care if we show up in these lists. And like, to some extent, I do believe him, right? Like, he wants to do what has actual value now, right? How do I actually know? Yeah. I don't know.
Can you name that?
I don't know, because I don't know if he knows. Again, I think it's just kind of a vibe thing now. Like, does he feel like he's successful, right? I think it is much more people oriented. I see him really, when we put on a dinner special or a dinner series or whatever, he'll really go around. He really wants to know what everybody thinks. And he'll ask us all, like, what are people saying? Yeah. All the things. So it is much more people focused now. I wish I had a better answer than that, but I really just he used to really care about these very clear markers of, you have a good restaurant, and now he just doesn't. He's moved on to other things.
That's why I see with Kelly on this front. She won the most prestigious award that you can win at her university. She's adjunct faculty without a PhD. This doesn't happen. Yeah. She won the best teaching award, and she did so prior to being a 60 or a 70-year-old professor. She won it when she was 40 some odd. Mm-hmm. That's the top. That's tippy top of what she can get, in terms of awards at that university. Her pivot toward living vicariously through her students. She teaches history education. The win now looks much more like heavy lifting of, do my students thrive and themselves get the awards? That is like true success. Like, I have created the atmospheres that produce really successful teachers in my field. That's the thing that really feeds her. And notice how relational it is as well. She wants to hear them call her. Like, this is a primary for her. She wants people to call her when they get a job. She wants to hear people call her when they get an award. She wants to celebrate the hell out of them when they do, because that's actually the mark for her. That strikes me also as really healthy. Like, that feels spacious to me.
Yeah, for sure. I agree. Being able to transition to we instead of me, I think is a big thing for a 3. And genuinely mean it.
I haven't heard you talk about that. Yeah. And genuinely mean it is right.
And genuinely mean it. Not just, I'm a team player because... you're supposed to be a team player and people will like me more if I'm a team player, right? Like, that is, I do think, a real trap that 3s can fall into. I don't want to be seen as the person who just thinks about themselves. So, but to genuinely be happy for your team and genuinely not care if anybody even knows you're on the team. Just
to know that you were a part of that.
Just to know for yourself
matters.
that you were a part of that. Yeah.
But that's high level 3.
Yes, that's what. Yeah. That's very high level. Yeah.
And I think it's just worth emphasizing. Just that's not a negative to say I was a part of that. I know I was a part of that.
Sure. Yeah.
You may get a chance to say it. I was so and so's professor. But at the same, that energy going inward, we see so much of the 3, seeking the messages that are external. The message that's internal and really hitting on excellence and being able to tell yourself, I hit the mark of excellence, and living in that space.
Yeah.
I think that is a well-won victory.
I think high level 3 is knowing that you were valuable and being able to hold that in your heart without having to show other people that you did it, right? I was a part of this team. I helped this team. Just going home and holding that in your heart versus going out and telling everybody, hey, look, I was a part of this team. Look at this big thing that the team did. Look at all the stuff I did to help. That's the difference. If I was part of a winning team, I would want people to know, right? So just being able to go home and just hold it in my own heart and not telling other people, that would be difficult for me.
The we did it, I think, is a great place to be.
Yeah, agreed. Okay, should we continue with ones?
Transitioning back to the responsive stance.
So sorry.
I think we're going to just talk a lot. The juxtaposition of 1s and 3s is going to be interesting here, because again, we're talking about this triad of 8s, 3s, 1s. So, given the colors really matter. Bottom of 61, she says I found this really helpful because it's about control. We all possess the ability to be controlling in any given situation. As members of the independent stance, the 8, 3s, and 7s control with self-confidence, high energy, swift processing. Solitary types, withdrawn types, 9s, 4s, and 5s, control through stubbornness and a shielded internal reference point. We'll talk about reference points in the future, I'm sure. The external reference point of 1s, 2s, and 6s in the responsive stance makes them the most outwardly and thus recognizably controlling. Of the 3 responsive types, 1s uniquely process with doing. As such, we are controlling through doing. I never see this in my life, but she has said this on our podcast before, that 1s, 2s, and 6s come across as the most controlling. I think she's absolutely right. Yeah. And it may surprise us how that manifests, but certainly for me, here's what we're accomplishing routinely is on my lips, mind, and how I seek to navigate the relationships I have. And I think it's worth naming. What do you see there?
Well, I'm just going to connect that back to actually one of the first quote that we had, which is just, it's not just what are we doing, it's how are we doing it too. Right? So just being able to say, okay, this is what we're doing, go do it. And then I'll come and check if it's done. That's not what 1s are doing, right? The controlling part of 1s is this is what we're doing and this is how we're doing it. And I'm going to be right here with you. You know, which again is great in some cases and not great in other cases, right?
We're going to build on that in the next quote, which was cutting. Like I don't get cut very often anymore with Enneagram material. I'm pretty familiar with Enneagram material, but this next quote got me.
Ooh, I'm excited. Which one did you pick?
Well, before we get into Jeff bleeding all over, the control, one of the things with 1s, 2s, and 6s, and we need to know this, and people who love us need to know this, is because we're repressed in our thinking, one of the ways that we control things is through questions. Questions have direction and they have power and they move conversation and they push other people in directions we want to go. But since we're thinking repressed, we don't have answers that we're communicating. We're pushing you with our questions to make you do the hard lifting of thinking, but it moves the conversation into spaces and I think that needs to get named because that can get unhealthy. Yeah. It can get real unhealthy for 1s, 2s, and 6s to pepper people with questions in a controlling way. Just needs to be named, it seems to me.
Something that reminds me of, I forget which part of the chapter it's in, but she actually talks about if Joey is consulting for a company And what they really need is like a new set of rules or regulations, or kind of, this is how we do things in the company. The first people she looks to actually are 1, 2s, and 6s, because she makes the point that if you're thinking repressed, you actually love rules and systems, because guess what you don't have to do if you have a system? You don't have to think, because the system does the thinking for you, right? Yep. Which I thought was fascinating. And that is so true. And I think the control can come out there too, because I see 1, 2s, and 6s get really upset with the other 2 stances when we don't follow the rules, because 3, 7, and 8s think we're outside of the rules, and 4, 5, and 9 just are kind of doing their own thing. It's just kind of under the radar, so you don't really notice. But 1, 2s, and 6s really hold people to the rules because they hold themselves to the rules, right?
Yep.
They're here for a reason. How do you know what to do if you don't follow the rule? Well, that only makes sense to a 1, 2, or 6, right? Because you're thinking repressed. So I thought that was interesting too, about how her point about how control can come out in that way as well.
Not saying she learned that from the Around the Circle podcast, but I'm suspicious.
Did you say that? Did you know that?
Oh, I talk about systems all the time.
Oh,
but here's something that she's plussing, I think, is that 1s, 2s, and 6s on this front, this is why compliant can creep into the language, is because of the rules. Specifically with 2s and 6s, the relational dynamic of I'm obeying the rules, that means that my relationships will go fine, because here were the standards that we put in place for connecting with one another and doing things together. And since I'm not breaking the rules, that means that all of my relationships, at least the groundwork, all covered. You know, I won't be at fault in that sense. Yeah. 1s aren't relationally motivated in that way. 1s are going to come to the rules for a different reason. But spot on, I think, in terms of a corporate environment, going to the 1s, 2s, and 6s, where are the rules here? What was her motive for doing it? Remind me, sorry.
She said when she's in a company that needs kind of an overhaul of their system or regulations, or kind of just putting things back in order, she goes to 1, 2s, or 6s. Those are the people she talks to first. So
that's interesting. Bang. All right, so scalpel in hand.
Yeah, I'm
She
excited.
says this on page 63. As the doing processor in the responsive stance, 1s utilize discussion to maintain consensus in their actions and the actions of others. Other types aren't wired to believe that accountability requires agreement, and many of those types find verbal processing to be laborious. Because 1s are emotionally connected to being right about the best course of action, their pursuit of consensus can be exhaustive. The agreement that 1s seek must come from the concessions of others, because 1s feel too strongly to concede themselves. I'm going to pause there for a second. I've off mic will commonly say to Kay that I fear being too much, and this is the space. This is the space that I will kill people. Had a handful of folks duck out of doing podcast work with me because of this. I'm saying, this is what we created. Look at it. Take another note. I really want us to be on the same page. And they're like, look, I recorded that last week. I don't care anymore. We're moving on to the thing. You're like, why would I want to up? And I'm like, no, because we need to put out a great product.
Right.
Because if we don't put out a great product, people aren't going to listen. If people don't listen, they're not going to follow. If they don't follow, then what the hell are we doing anyway? Like the finishing touches are an addiction for me, and it comes out in my language towards those that I work with in ways that can be, what did you call it? Yeah, exhaustive. You have thoughts here?
So, as someone who works with you, these are my thoughts. How I experience that from you is, it was mostly at like the start of when we started working together, because now we kind of have a pattern and it's, normal. Mm-hmm. But at the beginning, it felt like, one, you apologize for a lot of stuff. But two, it felt like we, you know, kind of made this tentative agreement. Yeah, let's start doing this stuff together. And then it felt like you kept looking back and we're like, are we still doing it? And I'd be like, yep, I'm still here. And then we'd move forward a little bit and you'd be like, is this too much? Are we still doing it? And I'd be like, yep, all right, here we go. And we'd move forward and you'd be like, do you still want to do this? Yep. So that sounded so sarcastic. Sorry. But
That's spot on there,
I
yeah.
didn't mind. You know what I mean? I didn't mind.
Mm-hmm.
But when I hear you tell me stories of other people that it didn't work out with,
Mm-hmm.
I imagine that is where it didn't work out because they were like, yeah. Like, yeah, let's just go. Right. Or, I mean, who knows what number they were for whatever reason. But that is what until we got in a really regular rhythm, there was a lot of like check-in of how are we going to get on a regular rhythm. Right.
Mm-hmm.
Which I actually really appreciate because I am bad at doing regular rhythm. So it was we've talked about this. It's very helpful for me. So I experienced that as a very positive thing. But it was like, we need to get to where we're going. And it felt like constantly you were still looking back to like see if I was still there, you know? And you didn't believe that you didn't believe, but like you weren't ready to let yourself believe that I was going to be there until we got there, right? Until we both arrived into this kind of regular rhythm. So sorry if that like puts you on blast in front of everybody.
No, I mean, in twofold, it takes a special, unique person to keep up with the ways that I tend to do things.
Yeah.
But it also is the case here to circle back to the thing that you were saying about pre-planning. This is a lot of it. It's like, it's just unfortunately the case, the sorts of building that I do, if you miss one thing, you're really going to get screwed. And it's hard to communicate that to people.
Yeah.
So for example, I'm building a building. I have the building project that I've been doing forever. Our HVAC system went in exactly the spot that the city is requiring us to put a sprinkler system. There are 20,000 things that I need to think about with this building, but this particular one will cost me. I know ahead of time things like this happen, which means that it's not like the 6-ish, like I'm terrified that things are, and then put things back in their place. And unfortunately, I can't convince other people that this is how the world works.
Yeah.
Because they don't process with doing.
Yeah.
It's not their gig. They are not, that's not where their heart is connected to reality. But here's the thing. I am, and generally the way that I connect with other people is by providing foundations for their livelihood, for their connections with other human beings. I'm building the infrastructure in which those things happen. And if I fail, then none of that gets realized. Long story short, this is why this comes up.
Yeah.
I can't commit, and oftentimes it can feel just laborious. However,
I think it's really interesting that you bring up a part of doing processing is not wanting to go backwards. Mm-hmm. And I assume I hesitate to say that a little bit because I think most people don't enjoy going backwards. You know what I mean? I don't think that's like only 8 3s and 1. I don't think everybody else is like, this is fine. But so I'm not going to have the words to explain the difference. I do feel like that is sort of part of doing processing. But I'm not touching something that I've already done. I'm not touching it.
Right.
And so it needs to be good now, or it needs to not matter that much. So if it turns out to be bad, then whatever. That's the difference between 3 and 1, right? If this doesn't matter that much, then whatever. I just won't come back to it anyway. But I'm not coming back here. So while we're here, we need to do it correctly, or whatever your version of that is an 8 3 and 1. We need to do it right now because I'm moving on, right? Again, that forward movement is the opposite of that would be having to go backwards, right?
Yep.
It's horrible enough just standing still, much less having to go back to where I was yesterday.
Yep.
That's fascinating.
And I assume that you have confidence in your ability to reframe things in real time for folks. If something broke, you can reframe the perception of it in order to accomplish your ends.
Yeah.
I can't do that.
Why not? Because it's not
Frustrates
true.
the hell out of Kelly. I can't do that.
It does frustrate me when other people can't do that. Yeah.
Yeah.
But I also understand why. Does it frustrate you when she tries?
No, it's more that it's one of those things where I slink back for a second and I'm just like, look, I don't have this skill. I don't have the skill to overlook the thing, because that's not where I'm processing. I'm processing by gaining my value based on what I built. I don't care what other people think about it. I need to build the thing well.
Yeah. That's what I want to say. Like, doesn't strike me as like a skill, although I mean, like, technically maybe it is, but it's just that we're motivated by something different. I have to reframe this so that then it looks okay. So that then I look okay. Right. It's not that I'm just like so much better.
Correct. It's where we're getting our sense of identity and self. Notice this. This is primary in terms of our motive. I don't want to be flawed. If I build flawed things, that makes me flawed.
Yeah.
It means that I don't have what is most essential to me feeling comfortable in the world. Conversely, it's the perception, both the perception you give yourself and the perception others give you about how your work goes. If you can qualify the perception, I assume it's the case. If you give yourself permission, if they give you permission, we can just keep moving forward here.
Yeah.
I find that a superpower. I so wish I could do that.
Well, again, I wish I could stay in something when it was broken. Like I wish integrity just keeps coming to me. Like, I wish I had the instinct to stay with something when it was hard and ugly. I do have the instinct to stay with something if it's hard. I don't have the instinct to stay with something if it's ugly. And I wish I did.
Yeah.
Because I think that's something to admire.
Sometimes. I mean, the positive, let me spin the positive. Sometimes it really is valuable to be able to move on. I have a really difficult time. I'm always the last one to turn the lights off on projects. And everybody else was gone, 2 years ago.
Yeah.
There's a balance there.
Yeah, there is. Certainly.
She writes, and I'll let this be the last quote, but to finish the thought, she says, accountability starts with verbal agreement to do something the way the one wants it done and continues with check-ins from the one until the task is complete. This specific brand of accountability, transparency combined with a desire for consensus through discussion, tends to interfere with the autonomy that others desire as they move through their own task lists at work. Such interference leads others to view one's version of accountability as unrealistic or flawed. This is where I was rolling with her. And then she was like, let people do their own thing. You're being too much. And so I just wanted to finish the surgical cut there. That it's very difficult. Like if it's the case that I'm pulling people into work, into doing certain things, and the process really matters to me, that is a niche environment for people to succeed in.
I like that I was wondering if you saw yourself in this chapter. I think I asked you that last time. Sometimes you read books about Enneagram and you're like, some parts of me show up in the chapter about my number, but not really. I read you all over this chapter about ones.
Sure. Right.
Like every sentence, I was like, yep. And again, not like good and bad, right? Like all the things.
Sure.
And so I guess my last question for you, like, did you feel that way when you read this chapter? Because I felt like I was reading about you.
Yeah, for the most part. And especially, I think I am real interested in hiding some of my flaws. Shocker.
Right.
They get exposed in social environments. They get exposed in work environments. I think I'm an entrepreneur and will generally pivot into spaces where I'm working one-on-one with people so that I can control the sense of flawedness. And I love, love, love having an edit button. I love being able to cut chunks of our discussions out before it goes live. There's very few things that I've put out into the atmosphere that didn't have, something surgically removed. It's like, that didn't come across well, did it? And so social environments like she's describing, work environments that are or more corporate in nature, I'm very, very bad at functioning in those spaces, and they would elevate some of the struggles that one's experience that she outlines, rightly so.
Fun.
Tough. All right, threes. I got my first quote for threes. You ready for this?
Go ahead.
It's just the difference between threes and the other two types in the heart triad. This will be primary for talking about processing center, because as we've noted, the threes are moving from the heart center to process with tools in the body center. So she writes, this is page 121 in the middle. Being the primary type in the heart triad means that threes possess the unique gifts for connecting with others that are inherent to twos and fours. For twos and fours who process with feeling, relational connection is the end. For threes who process with doing, relational connection is the means to an end. That's the distinction. I think that's well said, and I would love your thoughts.
I think what she means here, this relational connection, is there's two different phases of relational connection to me, okay?
Yes, you're right to bring this up.
There is the first one where you are going outside of yourself and making a connection with somebody else and talking to somebody else and asking them about themselves and doing all of that thing. That is like the outward relational connection. And then there is the result of that,
That's exactly
which is
right.
being seen, right? Which is what heart numbers want, 2, 3, 4.
Yep.
And so I guess I just want to make a distinction, because I totally think she's right in this quote, and I think she's talking about that first part. Threes are really good at making you feel like they're talking to you and they're wanting to know about you and all the things and blah, blah, blah. That doesn't necessarily always translate to the three then really seeing you and like connecting heart to heart with you, right? Which her next line is, while it can be jarring for others to realize the easy connection they made with a three was multi-purpose, making the leap to premeditated insincerity, blah, 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 is not true, or is false, or whatever. That's a long sentence, so I'm not going to read the whole thing. But
no, I think this is correct.
And what I was saying earlier was that I use doing to get the second part of emotional connection, which is to be seen.
Yep.
So I do think we're both correct. I think we're just talking about two different things, so maybe we need two different words, right? But she's saying threes use that first part in order to do something. And then I was saying, and then I do something to get the second part of the emotional connection, which is feeling valuable to people, right?
Yep. There's kind of a circular pattern. I think if you envision threes moving from the heart into the body, back into the heart. And you're right to say the first part takes place. Again, this is how the centers work. The centers are where you receive the world, and that needs to be named 28 times. You receive the world through your center. The three then pivots from that heart space into their bodies and into their thinking, in my view. And now they're going to use those other two tools to get the motive that they experienced in their heart space. It seems to me, and we hit this, and it was so helpful for me in our intro, that for 3, 6s, and 9s, their primary center makes them feel uncomfortable. And so they move out of it. But as she's saying, what's taking place, I assume for you, when you're centered and receiving the world, the primary thing you're receiving is the emotional radar and priorities of the people in front of you.
Yeah.
And you're taking that information in. What does this person want? And you do that better than anyone else.
Yeah.
Reading people in that space allows you to understand what would be required for connection. And then you're going to go when, but that requires you
Not
to move into your
connect.
body and into your thinking.
Yeah.
Well, no need to meet you at in your emotions anymore there, unless that's like the primary thing
Yeah.
that they want.
Yeah. Yeah. That's a good point, actually.
So what is it that the person wants? I'm going to go do it. And then I'm going to come back and see and reassess through my heart center.
Mm-hmm.
Did I do the thing that was praiseworthy in your mind?
Yeah.
Do I have value? And are we going to be connected moving forward? Right?
I think this is where the social chameleon of a 3 comes in, right?
Yes.
Different teachers have different thoughts about that wording, but I am reading what people want, which is the feeling center, like you just said, what people want out of their environment, what people want from me. And then I'm using that information to build myself into something that I feel like they want. I wouldn't be able to do that if I didn't first know what those people want, which requires being in the heart center, right? But then I go into doing and I perform that thing instead of like connecting with the person over what they want. I become that thing or build that thing or achieve the thing or whatever. And then I go back into the heart center. I'm like, did it work?
Yep.
Right? Do you see me? Did it work? Are we quote unquote connected now? Right?
And 2 footnotes there. Like, one, you have to care about the person in front of you. Some 3s will look at the person and say, this person is not worthy.
Oh yeah.
of
If
my
I think you're
investment.
like not worthy. Yep. Yes, absolutely. It is certainly you have to be worthy of being built for.
And then, then you're going to read what are the priorities so that I can attach. And the attachment, 3, 6s, and 9s all are going to connect in that way. And that's going to be common for those who pivot into other centers, other processing centers, is the attachment style is common for them. Quote number 2. This is at the bottom of 123. Being mindful of the non-negotiables for each type is presented in part 1. Non-negotiables for 3s include the ability to disconnect from negative emotions and exhibit positivity while navigating life via personal and professional goals. Every type has the capacity to set goals for themselves. Only 3s use goals to pave their way through life. I thought this was interesting. I thought it was hyperbolic, as she says she's into hyperbole, but
Which
because it
part
feels like
do you
an
feel
all
like?
or nothing.
Which part of that? Which sentence?
I don't actually know. That's just my notes in my book.
Was it the last line? Only 3s use goals to pave their way through life?
Yeah, that is actually.
What other number would you assign that to?
Oh, I absolutely use goals to pave my way through life. But it's in part. Maybe it doesn't really matter. What really matters here is, I think, one thing she really notes and recognizes, and I actually think she goes a little too far, is how much she sees positivity in the life of 3s and their ability to reframe. She really elevates that, sees that as valuable in some settings, and wants to do business with it. But the pivot, I think this is correct, the pivot of 3s towards saying, what is the goal that gives me energy and allows me to deal with apparent setbacks that I'm presently experiencing, I think is helpful. What do you see?
I think I want to respond to what you first said where you were like, this is hyperbole. I think this is a language issue, actually. And again, we could probably do a whole episode on this, but I imagine what Joey means when she says only, let me read the line. Only 3s use goals to pave their way through life. So we have to define 2 things. We have to define, what are you talking about by a goal? Are you just talking about like an actionable step? Right? Which one certainly would relate to. Or is a goal something that like informs you about yourself, right? I have accomplished this thing. That means I am this thing, right? Are you relating it to your ego? So first of all, we'd have to figure out what she means that way.
I think that's right.
And then the second one is, what does it mean to pave your way through life using goals? Does that mean you're a doing processor, right? Because that can't be what she means, because she says only 3s are doing it. So she can't just mean you measure your life through what you have done. She must mean something different, which I assume in her mind she's connecting it to, like, again, what I do is who I am. And again, I do think 3s and 1s are kind of close in that way. Like you just said earlier, like maybe 30 minutes ago, like if I do something flawed, that means I am flawed. But it like you're not in the heart center. So there is some difference, right, in how 3s and 1s feel about themselves related to what they've done. So I bet that is where that, not like miscommunication, but like I understand why you're reading that and like wanting to say, I don't think that's true. But I think it depends how you read it, I guess.
I use the word goals exclusively for 3s in our book on when we come to coping style, because 1s are going to focus when problem solving are going to focus on what's right, and 3s are going to focus on the goal. Yeah. So I suppose in part I can see that being it, but you're right in saying like I'm very concerned with goals and ends, and this is where my language that I would want to bring into this whole diagram is processing center, in my view, is about assessment. So you're assessing through what you're accomplishing. Mm-hmm. So call that a goal or call that something else. There's what is the end you're seeking to achieve? How would 8s do 8s have goals?
Well, I mean, I wish an 8 was here so we could hear. I just think an 8's goals aren't going to be necessarily tied to themselves like a 3's goals would be. It'll be much closer to a 1 of what needs to be accomplished here. Mm-hmm. Right. So in that sense of like, if we're just speaking about a goal as an actionable step, then certainly I'm sure 8s have goals. Right. I don't know if 8s set out to prove anything about themselves. Right. They already know. 8s don't need to prove to other people that they're strong. They already knows they're strong, right? So they don't need to prove that. Anyway, we can get into all of that. So I think it's a language thing. I think it depends on what we mean when we say setting goals. Yeah. Because if you just mean a thing that you do, then that's all doing processors. Then what's the point of saying goal, right? Then you just say doing processor.
My sense of 8s is that they are seeking to enact their will in spaces that make them less vulnerable in the future. And like high capacity 8s who have really succeeded, financially speaking, let's say, I think they're doing so because they never ever want to go back to that spot where they were poor.
Yeah.
And that's the end. Like I'm going to dominate in the space that I care about and that I have a lot of skill in, because I never want to go back to that space where I felt like others had power over me.
Yeah.
And that's the end. That can be a goal, but it feels like it's a different kind of end that's being achieved.
Does that not... Okay, I wanted to bring this up last time. And this is a real question. This is not like a pushback question. Does that not feel like resource guarding to you, what you just described?
It does.
Which is head center stuff?
Well, if we take her language of support center into...
That's fair. That's a good point.
Context.
That's a good point.
Their doing would be supported by
resource
that
guarding. Yeah.
Resource guarding.
Okay. Anyway, so probably do 8s have goals? Probably. I feel like they just look different and they're informed by different things.
It would be shocker. It would be the motive.
Right.
Of
goodness.
Why are you seeking this end?
Oh, imagine that. Yes. Yeah.
And well worth contrasting with the 3.
Yeah.
So why are you seeking the goal? It's not going to be out of some fear that the 3 is going to lack in the future, unless that lack is like associated with the perception of others. Now that I'm in poverty, people judge me a certain way.
Oh, yeah.
I could see that being the case, but the 3, the goal is associated much more with the glory.
Yeah.
Associated with
about me?
What's the perception I want? Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
The draw toward excellence is there. That's not where 8s are at.
The big difference I see in 8s between what I feel in myself is that 8s are really confused when people draw a line between what they've done and who they are. Like anybody. Like 8s are like, why would what I just did say anything about me? Or why would what you just did say anything about you? Right? Mm-hmm. So that is something I experience as a big difference between me and 8s. Like they're like, there's no connection there. And I'm like, yes, there is. Right? Obviously.
I think there would be, this would be where the small inner circle for 2s, 5s, and 8s kind of comes in. I'd be curious what the conversation would look like in close quarters on that front.
Yeah.
In real close quarters, like intimate quarters.
Agreed.
Because I think you are correct to say this is going to be just the outward posture.
That's a good point.
Towards their stuff. But behind closed doors, they may say something else. Anyway.
We just need to befriend an 8 like really, really, really well. And then we need to bring them on here and we need to put them on blast in front of everybody. And then we need to release it. So if any 8 is listening and wants to volunteer.
My third quote for 3s is on 125 in the mill. A helpful tool for understanding 3s taking in with the feeling center, but not utilizing feeling to process, is to visualize a 3 who recognizes that a friend or colleague is struggling emotionally. Because the 3 is feeling dominant and values interpersonal dynamics, they acknowledge the struggling individual to signal that they care. If the individual's response is to ask the 3 to join them in processing burdensome emotions, good word there, burdensome, the feeling least or last 3 immediately looks for an out. If this 3 can engage their processing center and do something to alleviate the struggle, they are all in. But to process emotions, the struggling individual would do better to consult a feeling processor like a 2, 4, or 6. Building, it seems like this quote builds on that idea that 3s are going to just feel uncomfortable in their center. And there's nothing wrong with that.
No, it just is.
Repressing.
Yeah. This is funny because when I was reading this is something I've always not liked about some descriptions of 3s is this whole thing about 3s not liking other people's emotions and not wanting to talk about your emotions. We just want to do all the time. I teach Enneagram. I love talking about people's emotions. Okay. The difference here though, is that as I was reading this, I was thinking in my head, you know, she goes, 3s can engage their processing center and do something to alleviate the struggle. Yes. And in my mind, I was like, that's what processing emotions is. Processing emotions, to me, as a 3, is doing something about them so that they go away.
Yeah.
Right? And this is, I can so see this in like my coaching style. Like when, like if someone comes to me and I point something out, I'm like, oh, hey, that's your number. Right? That thing that you just explained to me and you don't know why you did it. That's because you're a 5 or whatever. Right? Mm-hmm. And if they don't take that and run with it and fix it, bye. Right? Because I'm not going to tell you 4 times that that's why you're doing that. I'll tell you once.
Correct.
Right? So that's what, to me as a 3, that's confusing because I'm like, I love talking about people's emotions. What I really love is talking about people's emotions and then giving them something to do about those emotions, right? Giving them some knowledge that they can fix, quote unquote, their emotions with, right? Yeah. To me, that feels like I am processing emotions. What do you mean I don't like processing emotions? But when I look at 2, 4s, and 6s, I'm like, oh, I'm not doing what they're doing. I'm not sitting with people, not needing it to move anywhere, right? Yeah. I feel like I sit with people. As long as we're moving, I'll sit with you.
Yeah.
I won't just sit here.
It's both a great and a tricky thing for 3s on this front. Like, personally, I love the hell out of 3s who don't let me sit in emotional stagnation.
Come on. Yeah.
I would much prefer to, I mean, I suppose it's the case that's like sometimes you need to deal with things, but like I think I really appreciate someone saying, yeah, that sucks. Okay, here's my hand. We're going over here.
Yeah, here's what I think you should do about it.
I think that can be very valuable. I mean, in part, I want to say feeling processing isn't yours to do. Like, that's not going to be your strength. No, I agree. Why focus on that? Yeah.
Yeah. Well, yeah, I agree. That's what I have to say about that.
If you're teaching, but I love the idea that you teach about emotions. You're seeking to have people engage their emotions, but it is the 3, like just a common 3 example of I'm on stage. I used to be in this space. Let me tell you the story about where I used to be and how I, through this 5-step process, transcended
And so
past failures. And
may
now
you.
I'm on stage with a microphone.
Yeah, exactly. Just follow my lead.
And that's a caricature. And a lot of times such folks are incredibly helpful.
Yeah.
But that's what I see there.
Yeah. Agreed. It is. I speak to a lot of 3s who, and again, like I would have said this about myself too. Like they're like, I feel vulnerable. Like I talk about my emotions all the time, all the things. And I'm like, awesome. Do you talk about them after you're done with them? Right? After you figured out what they mean and what you can learn from them and all the things. That's not being vulnerable, right? Being vulnerable is I'm dealing with this thing right now and it makes me want to crawl into a hole telling you about it. Right?
Yeah.
If talking about your emotions doesn't make you want to crawl into a hole, then you're not talking about vulnerable emotions, like by definition, right? And 3s are not good at wanting to crawl into a hole in front of everybody, for sure. And like feeling in front of people, right?
I'm just not the person to comment on this.
Yeah.
Like everything that's going to come out of my mouth is going to be, why would I want to live in that space?
Yeah.
Which you've heard me say in the past. Like,
I have thoughts, but yes, we've talked about that. We have. I mean, your line into feeling is 4, which means it's messy and swirly and hard. And why would you want to live in that space?
Filled with stress.
Filled with stress.
I'm going into my stress number in order to fix something so that I can get back to doing some productive stuff.
Right. Uh-huh.
Any value in getting into your emotions that you see?
Yeah, then you feel your emotions. Then you're connected to 1/3 of what life has to offer.
Okay.
Their emotions are meant to be felt, and that's it. Just because you can't turn them into anything or turn them into a lesson or a story or anything doesn't mean that they're not helpful. They're just there. Right? And that's the doing processor in us is, well, yeah, but we want to do something with them. Well, that's not what they're there for. Someone else told me that, by the way. That wasn't wisdom from a 3. That was wisdom that a 3 needed to hear.
I'm positive there's wisdom in that. I'm positive that is something that should be embraced. Just can't get into it.
Yeah, I know.
Can't get into it.
that would be like a therapist thing right? I can't convince you of, I don't know, maybe at one day in your life, you're just going to wake up and be like, oh, but like your anger has something to tell you.
Mm-hmm.
And it might not be good or valuable or not valuable. Anyway, it might just demand to be felt, and that's it. But ignoring it is not helpful because then you're not learning. Anyway.
That's fair.
When I ignore my feelings, I ignore large parts of myself is what I've found. I ignore the parts of myself that are trying to like tell me something. Like your emotions are responses to how the world is treating you, right? Or how you feel about the world. And if I ignore when I get angry or if I ignore when I feel shame, I'm like ignoring, I'm like not learning about myself. I'm not learning which parts of me get triggered by those things. And I'm not learning, I don't know. I just feel very cut off from myself when I don't feel my feelings.
You're awakening me to stuff that I need to do business with. I have no problem with my repressed center. I have a hard time with my secondary center. I would be curious if that's not something that might be true of others. Yeah, think on that. But all of what you're saying, I think, is quite wise. Fourth, for the primary types, 3, 6s, and 9s is the bottom of 126. For the primary types, 3, 6s, and 9s who shift away from their dominant center to process with a preferred center, those two centers become inextractably tied to one another as the 3, 6, or 9 move through life. Look at 9s who shift away from doing to process with thinking. Most of a 9's mental energy encompasses what needs to be done. Acknowledging that thinking represents logic and objective reason, 9s are able to come up with a litany of logical reasons to delay doing. 6s shift away from thinking to process with feeling. 6s are notorious for engaging others through sharing personal information and looking to trusted advisors when a lack of transparency surrounding the distribution of data makes them feel uneasy. And for 3s, who shift away from the feeling center to process with doing, action and implementation will inevitably involve people. Understanding that 3s are inherently collaborative doers makes it easy to see why they can be so influential as they engage the world. That's a good little shorthand, end quote. That's a good little shorthand for what's taking place with those 3 as they pivot. But what do you see specifically for the 3s there?
I guess I don't have anything new to say. I think we've just been saying that this whole time, right? Of course, doing is connected to people. Like for me, like I said, it was a shock to me to find out that 8s and 1s doing was not connected to people. Like I knew that because I know they're not in the heart center, but to really see the examples of that in all of these chapters, I was like, oh, like y'all really aren't thinking about that, huh? Like I'm the only one right? Like that's not. So I don't have anything new to say. I just think that's a good wrap. I think that's a good kind of wrap up quote for everything we've been saying.
I'm trying to see what the equal term for collaborative doer would be for these other 2. Is there one?
Well, is she getting collaborative from the feeling center?
She is.
So
that's
collaborative doer. So a 9 would be an action-oriented thinker.
Yeah.
And then a 6 would be a feeling information seeker, or like I switched those two, but like something like that, or
a thinking feeler or something.
Yeah, like subjective thinker, which is an oxymoron, but
I do think this is in part correct. No, I think this is altogether correct. The targets of doing for the 3 are going to have other people in mind.
Yeah, I can't do without other people being involved in my thought process somehow.
In the thought processes.
Yeah.
Like I think like on one side you can say I act independently, but it is the case that when thinking about action, it's very seldom going to be the case that you're thinking about executing your goals that don't have other people at some level in mind.
Yeah, I don't often have goals that are not connected to what other people will think about them, when I'm unhealthy. When I'm healthy, I do, but
in terms of what is a big priority in terms of these are the things I want to highlight that have other people in mind.
Right, exactly.
Gives you a lot of purpose and a lot of energy. This is how this is going to go. A lot of us need that. My last quote for 3s is on page 130. It's near the end. She says, as established in part 1, 3s navigate life via competitive comparison. While fueling comparison can become competitive for the rest of the heart triads, 2 and 4s, it is always competitive for 3s. When you are hardwired to start with a focus on self and your motivating need to succeed is achieved through competitive comparison, it is understandable that others might interpret your actions as self-centered. So, speaking of quotes that feel like a scalpel, does that hurt?
I think it's just like sometimes things are so true that they just can't even really hurt. Like you're just like, well, yeah, And that's how I feel about this. Like I can't even really get my feelings hurt about it because it's just so true. And I think I imagine there are some people out there who will be like, oh, I can't tell it's so mean to tell a 3 that they're competitively comparing. Like that sounds so mean. We shouldn't keep pointing that out. Like that would make me feel so bad if someone told me that. And I think people underestimate how core seeing in comparison is to how I view the world. It is nearly impossible for me to conceptualize of walking through the world and not seeing everything in comparison. like that's one of the things about like no matter how much I study the Enneagram, that's always going to be hard for me to like remember that other people aren't doing that. And like how much it flavors like every interaction you have with everybody ever. And how you orient yourself in the world and all the things. So I don't know. I guess I don't have anything to say other than like this is so core truth for me.
Yeah.
That I mean, I don't know. That's it. I don't have anything to say about that. It just is.
I want to walk through what I see, and again, this is just bragging on my wife on this front, but there is something about early on three's understanding that attention can be doled out in awards, and some awards have levels. Mm-hmm. This is gold, this is silver, this is bronze, etc. What I see in Kelly is really a shift into 2 space and 4 space to balance this element of herself. And that is she makes herself indispensable in spaces that nobody else is playing. And all of a sudden, there's nothing to compete with, as it were, relationally. Yeah. And that, I think, is a real healthy move for her in order to find her self-worth identity and bring value to the relationships she has, where she's not looking to overshadow anyone else. And so too, pushing into that 2 space, a lot of that uniqueness can be expressed in service. And that likewise just makes her unique, stable, still gets the attention desired. What I see in this chapter is that she's really highlighting, that Joey's really highlighting in a corporate space, if it's the case that you have ladders of success, if it's the case that you're competing for your boss's job, it may be very difficult to do that if you don't have some sense of, look, this is who I want to be in this company, and I don't necessarily need to go to the next level, as it were. Mm-hmm. You know what I mean there? Mm-hmm. That's kind of what I see there. So what do you think?
I think it's interesting. Is this the... I don't think this is where she talks about it, but she does talk about in the 3 chapter, I think somewhere in the 3 chapter, about how work culture has changed so much that 3s used to be rewarded so much. Like in the boomer culture, 3s just shot up through the ranks. Like they became the boss so quickly. But now work culture has changed and it's much more feeling focused. So 2 6s and 4s are kind of getting promoted over like 3s and 8s and 7s. I think was
her claim that it was, we've moved towards longevity versus merit?
I think so. And like we've moved towards like cooperation over just proving yourself. You know what I mean?
There it is. Proving yourself is a good word.
Proving yourself. Yeah. Like companies want to know that you can work well with others. And so 2 6s and 4s are great at that, right? Because they're feeling processors. And so I thought that was interesting as well, that like this competitive comparison. Again, I say that neutrally. I guess that's what I was trying to say earlier. That's such a neutral thing for me. I see how it helps my life and I see how it hurts my life in pretty equal measure. And I think it's interesting that in different cultures or spaces or at work versus at home, like that can so serve you or it can really, really hurt you. In different generations, it can serve you versus hurt you. So I thought that was interesting as well. Like it just is. Yeah. It just is. You know, it's what you do with it and it's where you are, where it really matters.
Comparison is going to go alongside it's going to cover the whole heart center. Yeah. When one is seeking attention to fulfill your motive, comparison is going to be a big deal. Mm-hmm. The desire of the 3 to win, because they're pivoting to doing, okay, in order to get the positive attention that I desire, I'm going to execute. How else can you do that?
Right. I'm like, what do you mean? Yeah.
Yeah, well worth naming. And I suppose there are types who may feel as though the 3s in their lives are overly competitive, especially if the 3 digs on them. This is when, at some point we could talk about this. I think there's something to be said for when each of the types will weaponize their motive. Mm-hmm. And 3s can cut you down better than anybody. Yeah. Like publicly shaming you is a gear that 3s can shift into.
Throwing you under the bus. Absolutely.
Yeah.
Yes.
But that is the shadow side of a coin, because you flip that coin over, and threes are the best in the world at elevating the standing of another person before everyone else, and doling out praise in a way that actually is legitimate, has body to it.
Healthy threes always get talked about as good coaches. And to be a good coach, you have to see the layers in people. You have to see what they're good at, and you have to be able to see what they're bad at. And you have to see how they compare to other people. You know what I mean? Like, you have to be able to see that in people to make people better. And of course, anybody can do that to be a coach, but threes are just wired like that, right? Like, we do that anyway. And so I imagine that's kind of where that comes from, is using that lens of comparison for good, right? Instead of for cutting other people down, for building people up.
Bang. Well, we did it. Accomplishment, goal, check mark.
Check.
I imagine, are going to spend a lot more words on doing processors than the others. So no lack of love for everybody else, but we apparently needed to talk a little bit about this book and ourselves and what we were learning. And so,
yeah, we did.
Hey, Katie, guess what?
What?
At aroundthecircle.org, we are doing a new thing. We're doing the reading room. We're going through great Enneagram books, and we had 17 people show up for this silly thing last night.
Yay.
I was shocked. I thought 4 people were going to show. We had 17 people who came together. We're talking higher level Enneagram concepts, theories. A lot of us don't get a chance to do this in life. And if you just are in that spot where you want to talk about the things that matter most on Enneagram with other people from around the world who are in that same spot, had a great time. You can see examples on our website. And just wanted to do a shout out to that. Anything you want to plug? Anything going on in your world?
If anybody has, speaking of, a lot of what draws us together in the Enneagram community is that nobody in our real lives knows the Enneagram, right? So we have to find other people. So like Jeff said, he started this book club because a lot of people want to talk about these books. If you are walking through your life and you feel like there is something missing and you want to talk about Enneagram with people, but you just feel like a group to talk about what you want to talk about doesn't exist, let us know. We would love to start whatever people want. If you are like, I want a group that talks about this every week, great, let us know, right? We are always looking for ways to connect people, to start community, to host things, to do classes, all the things. So if you have an idea for anything, if you want to see us do anything, let us know. We would love to hear from you.
Great. We're easy to find on Instagram. We're easy to find at aroundthecircle.org. It's a good word.
Boom.
Hey, guess what, Kay?
What?
You're the best.
You are.
Somebody told me that if you